Hello and welcome to another session. So in our previous sessions, we answered a very important question like why do we need fine tuning? Because we learned that prompt engineering and raw and RAG solve many problems, but they don't permanently change the model's behavior because every time that you want us answer in a particular way, you have to supply that prompts every single time, which will basically increase the cost. If you are using it very frequently, right? Like an example, like if you're doing it a million users and they constantly use it, it will increase. So we have seen that. Okay, so today we are going to answer the next question. So when we fine tune a model, what exactly changes, right? So are we going to add new knowledge, right? So these are the questions, like if I fine tune, does that mean that I'm going to add new knowledge to it, or am I going to replace that model itself, or are we writing new code? Okay, are we writing new code for this model? So these are some of the questions. So the answer is none of this. So what we're actually doing is we are basically changing the model's weight. So we are going to so this is important, we are going to change or update the model's weight. So AI models weight. So also this is also called as parameter. So this is important. So you might actually hear like, hey, this is 1 billion parameters, this is contains this many things or all this stuff. So we are going to update. Okay, so let's imagine that we have this LLM, right? So you have this AI model here. Okay, now what happens in this AI model? Now we give an input, it invokes the LLM model, and we get an output. Okay, so this is a simple. So in this machine, right, in this particular AI model, so there are there might be billions of tiny numbers. Okay, just think about this in this way. So inside this machine there are billions of tiny numbers. So these numbers are basically called as parameters or weights. Okay, so these are called as parameters or weights. So what are those? So they basically determine how the AI model generates every response. So these parameters or weights, they determine this is important, so that's why I'm writing out. So they determine how the model generates response. So let's say that you have this weight. I'm just giving you a random example before we actually go. So let's say you have weight like this, 1.0 minus 0.2 or 0.6, something like this. So if this is the weight, so you might get the response like this. Okay, now if I if I update this day weights, right, so my response will be slightly different. Okay, depend how you update this. Okay, so if you are a machine learning expert, right, if you have learned machine expert, you will understand like how the weights are. So what you do is for training, so you take the weights, you randomly create the weights, you basically change the weights, and then based on the weights you will basically see the different results, right? So same way, so if you change this or if you update this weights, your response would be different. Okay, now now you understood what you have to do, right? So what you have to do is like, if you want a different response, you have to basically update the weights. That's the only thing that will do, right? Okay, so now we know that we have to update the weights. So now what exactly are these weights, right? So because it might sound very complicated if you're not from the ML background, but don't worry about the mathematics and all. Like, we don't want to get into all the mathematics of the weights and everything, because that's going to be very complex, and we really don't need it because we are only using the system, we're not really creating something, right? So we are basically changing the weights. Okay, so now for simplicity, so just think of weight as a tiny setting inside a model. Okay, so just think of it as a tiny setting. So in a model, this is a setting. Okay, so for example, like imagine your phone camera, right? So it has so many test settings, right? So when you want to take a photo, you can increase your brightness, right? There's something called as contrast, saturation, exposure, sharpness. So these are basically some of the settings that you have. Now if you change some of these settings, right, your output would be different, correct? So you take one picture with one setting, correct, and then you change those settings and you take another picture, so you will see some difference. So maybe some of them would be very bright, the other picture will be not so bright. So this is something that we do, right? When we want to take a photo, so we if you see the photo and you don't like it, the camera, then you go back and change the settings. So that way, you want, like, if there is no light, so you might want to increase the brightness and all, right? So you do the setting. The same way, in the same way, what we can also do is a language model also we can make those setting. Now only exception, only thing is, like, here you have like 4 settings or maybe 10 or 20 settings, but in the language it will have billions of those settings. That's the only thing. So here you will have few settings, but here you'll have billions of settings and they are working together. So together those settings determine how the AI responds. So now you are updating this 5 to 6 settings, that it looks great, but how about billion settings, right? How do you update those? So that is a good question to ask. Okay, now before we answer that question, right, I want to basically help you understand, if we are not clear, the difference between your fine tuning and pre-training. Okay, so what happens in the pre-training, right? So your models are trained on variety of resources, like from internet to books, maybe code, articles, Wikipedia, research books, a lot of other things, right? So all these things are trained, and then you will be, these are done pre-training. All these are trained on your model, and then you would basically get a general AI model. Okay, so you'll get a general AI. So that is the reason why when you actually ask GPT models, these are all trained on all these things. So this GPT model will be able to help you with your code. It will help you writing an article. It will help you with your research papers. So all these things are done because these are all been trained on a lot of these things. Okay, so during this pre-training, the model learns with enormous amount of public data. These are all public data. Now, this process may take weeks depending upon the model or the infrastructure. It can take months, right? So this is a very high process. Okay, so this process can take a lot of time. At the end, we'll get a general purpose language model, and that is something that we have been using, like the GPT models, the Grok, the DeepSeek. So these are all those models. Okay, now let's take an application. Now imagine that you want an hospital, you are working in a hospital and they want a medical assistant. So they don't want to train another model from scratch because it takes a lot of time, effort, and it's very costly. So what they could do is they could basically start with an existing model. So let's say there is one model. So this model already has information about medicines, okay, medical things. It has a lot of information on medical, general knowledge. It has access to the code, SQL code, maybe big data code, all of this. But as a medical staff, you don't need all this information. You only need information related to the medical, correct? Now, whatever it further needs, right? So let's say it might have generic information. Okay, so if you ask a question about a particular thing, right, will have a very generic information. But if you want to train that and give it a very specific, like for example, if I ask a question about, like, hey, I have cough, right, and what should I do, it might give you a very lengthy response. It might give you very complicated certain things. But if I use a medical assistant, right, so in that I want to fine tune in a way, like, okay, you have cough, so first step is I don't want to keep that very lengthy. So, and again, I want to start with being empathetic. I'm saying, like, oh, I'm sorry that you got cough, and if it is a winter season, I want to say, like, hey, you know what, this is a winter season, so it's natural that you'll catch cough. But then you'll ask questions, hey, do you have other people in the house? Did you get it from here? Did you get this from here? If you are at home, these are the natural remedies that you can do. Or if you are still needs further assistance, if you want to contact our doctor, so here is a number that you can contact, or you can just email it is here. So all these things are customized way of how we can give the response, right? So those things we need to basically fine tune. So that is an important, that's an application that I'm saying. So instead of getting the generic response from your AI model, you can get a very specific response. So you are only worrying about like what is the problem that you have and how can you resolve it, whether you can resolve it at home or whether you can resolve it by visiting a doctor, that specific medical assistant, whoever built that, right? So that is an important application. Okay, and that's where you can basically fine tune. Okay, this now, how do you fine tune? Okay, so again, as I mentioned, fine tuning is basically you adjust the weight. So let's say you have weights like this. Okay, so some random numbers, right? So, and again, I'm just giving some examples. It actually has a lot of this. Now you basically do the training, and the training, after fine tuning, what happens is these weights might get changed, like it might come like this, something, right? 0.99, something like this. Okay, so this is basically how you, this is basically the process is fine tuning, so updating you the weights, right? By training with examples, whatever. Okay, now here basically, we just making the changes to the weights using some training examples. We will not change the model, like model will be itself. We will just basically update the weight using some training examples. Like for example, if, as I mentioned, like if somebody asks about a cough, these are the things that we need to give a response. Like this is how we would put. We will check if this is what is the current weather, right? And in which place, like if you are exposing it to multiple countries, maybe some countries it's very cold, some countries it's very hot, so you can't give the same response, right? So those are the things that you can do. You change text. And if and again, if you want to visit a doctor, like if you are across everybody, right? So particular you have to actually specify the region, right? So where your doctor is. Otherwise you cannot say like, I'm sitting in India and you are asking me to visit a doctor in US for cough. That's not good, right? So these are things that you need to train with a live examples, and then you need to fine tune it. Okay, so you got the application, right? So what is the business case, right? So this is an important application that you can use. Now same thing you can do for customer support also, right? So customer support also, you will have like people, like I can have a customer support which is global, like people can from different countries can actually use my customer support application. Depending upon the policies in different countries, I need to give a different example, so I need to kind of fine tune. I can use a generic model because different countries the rules may be different, and how you interact with different people may be different. Like certain countries or certain people would want you to start with certain things, like being more empathetic. Certain people just want the results, right? You just give me, I don't want all this empathetic and all this thing. Just tell me what, just give me the blunt answer for this. And again, those are the things, applications that you can use. Okay, so now we understand the application use cases, right? So now the question is, like I said, like, hey, you know what, some models have 1 billion parameters, right? So do we fine tune all those? So that's an important question. So here you can see this dot dot dot, so I cannot write all those 1 billion parameters, but the thing is, if it has 1 billion parameters, do we basically fine tune all of this, right? See, we can do is technically we can do it, right? So that basically means it is actually changing into a completely different model. That is possible. um, you should ask that question, like, do we really need to do, because it involves large GPU memory, long training time, high storage and cost. See, this is like almost creating a new model. The process of updating, see, when you update all the parameters, that basically means it is a new mode. But you can do this technically, you can do this. If you are updating all the parameters, that is basically you're doing a full fine tuning. So this process is called as full fine tuning. And again, there might be an interview question on that, to say like, what is full fine tuning? So if you update all the parameters, that is basically called as full fine tuning. It is almost equivalent to a new model. Okay, and it involves a lot of cost, it involves a lot of training time, and it involves a lot of infrastructure. So it's not something that you can do in your laptop. Okay, so that is full fine tuning. Okay, now it, some, not everybody can afford to do a full fine tune, right? So because obviously because of all the reasons that I explained, like GPUs and all the things. So if you are in a hospital, so you will not have that level of high storage and memory just for this technical thing. So you want to concentrate more on the patients. All right. Okay. So now also, like the medical assistant or customer support, we are basically concentrating on a specific task. See, this model can do lot of tasks, like it can write code, it can generate emails, it can generate responses, it can generate images, some models might generate videos, it can do a lot of tasks, some millions of tasks, but you want a specific task, you want a customer assistant, or you want a medical assistant. So this is a very specific task, right? So instead of doing a full file tuning, so what we can do is, if you're looking for a specific task, so we can do something called as parameter efficient fine tuning, or it's PEFT. So this is parameter parameter efficient fine tuning. Okay. So in this, we basically keep the original model froze and train only a small set of additional parameters. So what we do is, so you have a model, it has 1 billion parameters. So what we do is, we basically do not touch it. So we basically freeze this model. Okay. So we don't touch this, we freeze this model, and then we take additional parameters, and then these additional parameters only we will train. So while we use the generic knowledge of this, we, because we also need to have, because the model will be able to answer the questions and everything, right? So we still need that LLM model, but we add the additional parameters, we train those additional parameters, and this way what happens is, whatever the things that we need from that model, so we will train it using additional parameters and we'll get the response. Okay. So we'll talk about this in upcoming sessions. So this technique is called as PEFT. So LoRa, right? So this is the most popular PEFT technique. So we'll talk about that in upcoming classes. But for just now, just understand that we will basically update the few parameters, additional parameters, and we'll train it while keeping the model froze. So that way you can actually have this from your laptop. You can do this from your laptop. Okay. So that technique is LoRa. So we'll talk about that in our upcoming sessions. But before we wrap up, so basically, before we wrap up, just to revise, so if you want to change the behavior, you update the weights. So what we do is, we basically have, there's a technique LoRa and QLoRa. What we do is, we take the base model, we add additional parameters, we train those instead of training those 1 billion parameters, we train the additional parameters, whatever that is required for our end, and then we basically using those updated weights, we basically will be able to generate the responses that we want. So that we will see in the upcoming session. So this is basically the concept of like what happens during the fine tuning, and in the next couple of sessions we'll talk more about this, the PEF techniques like LoRa. We'll also talk about Quora, QLoRa. All right. So this is all about we have in this session, and I'll see you guys in my next class.